Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. My next guest is an AUDHD-er, also a psychologist, and lives in Australia. So sit back, relax, and grab your favorite beverage, and let's learn more about her. See you there.
I wanna believe in the truth, but only see what I'm shown. Got the freedom to choose, but can't decide on my own. Follow what the group is thinking, bottle up my intuition till it's
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Today I'm joined with Johanna Knie. Welcome to the show, Johanna.
Howdy.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
You never know how to answer these questions. Immediately, autism brain is what specifically do I tell a person? So normally I just start with work, because even though that's not me, that's just part of me. So I'm a psychologist here in Australia. Hopefully, we can tell by my accent. I work for myself and have two dogs. So if we call myself a dog mum, that's a thing. And I'm ADHD, so autistic and ADHD.
So when were you diagnosed and which was first, ADHD or autism?
Good question. So I wasn't diagnosed until a few years ago. So like maybe three and a half years ago. And ADHD came first. And that was mostly because it was easier for me to tolerate the idea of ADHD for myself and I guess the people around me at the time. So, and the executive dysfunction of like terrible time management. Like all my ADHD symptoms, I think, were far more obvious. And so that just came first. And so then about like maybe 6 months later, after some kind of unpleasant comments from people, I started the assessment process for autism. And then, well, shocker, I got diagnosed as autistic as well.
Now, before you got your diagnosis, did you kind of feel like you were on the outside looking in?
Yes, I didn't know if there was a term for it. So I had made it up for myself, say as an adolescent, and I called it floating head syndrome. And I
Hmm.
didn't think it was like, I had never met anybody with autism, maybe one person, and they were autistic with intellectual disability, level 3 support needs. So it was just one single view of what autism was. And that is not how it's expressed through me. So I didn't even think of it for myself. But it was floating head syndrome. And the idea for me was when group pictures, like, when you're at school or parties or something, in theory, because I didn't go to a lot of parties, that when there's a picture taken and there's all these people like in the picture at the front and then maybe in the middle. And then for me, it's that floating head in the background that
Mhm.
has no one with their arms around them, no one who's like interacting with you as if you're kind of some stranger who's just walked out of nowhere and photobombed. And like for me, it was that floating head because I'm a tall person as well. So I had to, in inverted commas, be in the back. So I'm just floating head. So it just felt like that from as early as I can remember. That kind of, I'm not part of it. I'm just floating in the background. Hmm.
Now, when you got your diagnosis, for both, did it kind of help explain everything of your past? Why you had certain mannerisms, why you acted certain ways towards people, why people just looked at you differently and viewed you differently?
To a degree, it was the relief grief process, that concurrent, oh man, okay, now I can actually Google a whole bunch of stuff and start to make sense of things, but also the grief process of like, oh man, I got diagnosed in my 30s. Why wasn't this picked up earlier? It would have been real nice to know so that maybe I could have learnt some skills or gotten some help or not felt like a floating head as like a kid. And then maybe my adolescence wouldn't have been as hard. And then maybe my like early 20s, it wouldn't have been as hard. And then, flow on. But yes. And I'm still making sense of it now because like 3 years isn't that long of, oh, that's an autistic thing for me. That's an ADHD thing for me. And feeling at times which is more strong. I don't know if that's the right word, but some days it's like, whoa, I feel very much in my ADHD space and executive function is not working. And then other times it's like, whoa, I definitely feel really autistic right now. And the ADHD is kind of in the back burner. But still figuring out, because it's so dynamic, what does this all mean? And how do I apply it to who I am as a person?
No, that's kind of interesting you say that because do you feel at times one overrides the other? Like at times your
Mm,
ADHD kind of overrides your autism, and at times your autism kind of overrides your ADHD, and you try to
mm,
manage so they're both at the same level.
yes. I think for me, it's the executive functioning for the ADHD. Like my experience with time is a big one.
Hmm.
Um, that if I don't have my ADHD managed, time is just this weird concept that, and I just struggle in experiencing it in the same way that someone who's not ADHD or not autistic would. Like, I think I was playing a hockey game a couple of weeks ago, and we do quarters,
Hmm.
and I swore, like in my head, I was like, "Oh, we're at Q2," and one of my teammates was like, "No, we're at Q4." I'm like, huh? I could not ground myself into the like actual reality of what time point we were at. And, not because I've dissociated, like I'm around, like I'm experiencing things, but the actual like timing of stuff, I'm like, I don't understand. There was a split second of like, I don't believe you. They're Josh and but the game quickly ended because it was Q4. But that experience of time is a big one that tells me ADHD symptoms are ruling things more so than my autistic side.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Now, how do you handle that? I mean, I know time management for me is tough
Mm.
because it's just trying to figure out how long something's going to take, and my mind just can't wrap around it like, oh, this is going to take that long. Oh, I can get that done so easily. And then it just feels like it
Yeah.
just drags on and on. It's like going somewhere on your own and time just lags. But the minute you go somewhere with somebody, it just flies.
Yeah. I don't know if it's the same as like body doubling, where I'm just getting an energy from somebody else and I can do a task, like get that dopamine hit for someone just literally sitting next to me doing nothing. They could just stare off into space. I'm just like stealing their dopamine somehow through osmosis. But maybe it's the same with time, where because there's another person, I don't know, maybe I'm more grounded into the experience of time in the same way we're kind of supposed to experience it. Like I talk about it at work sometimes. Most of the folks I work with are extremely dissociative, which is a different process than the executive function, like of time blindness. But this idea of our experience with the world and time being a linear or sequential thing that, like, I don't know, say, yesterday I remembered this happened at 5 o'clock and this happened at midday and this happened at 8 a.m. I don't remember things that way because my experience with time isn't 5 p.m., midday, blah, blah, blah. It's, at least for me, what is my emotional state? Is there a narrative to my experience? And so it's like chunked in that way. Like, oh, I remember when I was feeling really good. Oh, yeah, that was dinner. And that would have been around 5 o'clock rather than, oh, at 5 o'clock, I had dinner and I felt really good. And so I kind of use that as my clock. When was I feeling a certain thing? And that or my anchor point for time itself rather than when was that thing? Because I've had it with, and I always get so worried. They're like, oh my God, I'm going to get in trouble. I had because I work from home. And so my car's parked outside. And some dingleberry kids were riding their bicycles and fell onto my car. And so scratched up the car a whole bunch. And that was really stressful because it's a car that I've wanted for a very long time. And the car before I kind of just treated like poop. So I treat this car very well. So this idea of these strangers, they're just kids, they've scratched it up and they ran off. And so it was injustice, flag. And that, because it was so stressful, my understanding of when it happened in terms of what day it was just way off. So when I talked to my insurer and they said oh, when did that happen? And say it was a Thursday, and I talked to them, I said, oh, that was Monday, because it had so much had happened emotionally because I'd worked for a full day, or a full 2 days. So much had happened emotionally in 2 days that it felt like several days. And so I told them, oh, it was a Monday. But it was actually literally the day before. It was less than 24 hours before that it had occurred. But because, like I said, emotionally, so much had happened that it felt like days and days and days. I'm I don't understand how people don't experience time that way. That they can just look at their watch and go, oh, yeah, 3 hours ago, this happened. Go, it feels like 8 hours or 8 days because so much happens in between 10 a.m. and midday.
I know that experience all too well. It's you get so much going on. You feel like time has moved, but really it's only such and such time, or you're lagging for the day and the time just moves very slowly, and
Mm-hmm.
you totally because it's moving slowly, you totally forget what day you're on.
Oh my God.
And it's is today Wednesday or is today a Thursday, or something's going really good and you feel like it's a weekend because you're doing stuff and things are happening, and it's oh no, today, what is today? Oh, it's not Saturday, dude. It's not Sunday. Today is Wednesday. It's why is it Wednesday? It felt like a Saturday.
Yeah. Maybe because our brains, as ADHD folks, are experiencing, processing so much more information. And so just the experience of the world is so much more rich, in depth, not necessarily pleasant all the time. But if we're processing so much information, maybe it's just a subconscious thing of surely more time has passed because so much has happened. And another person who might be holistic or neurotypical, they don't really, at least in my experience, express the richness of maybe a standard day of, oh my gosh, all these things happen. Go, oh yeah, I just went to the grocery store. Be I went to the grocery store and it was so loud, and there were these people who were yelling at each other because the bread wasn't there, and there's just so much more happening for us, even though the same thing is happening for other people, that maybe we're in it, but also not in it at the same time. I don't know. As if you're playing I don't play D&D. I'd like to, but if you play a really long D&D game or whatever it's called, I'm sure people are going to be yeah, she doesn't know the right word. That it might feel oh yeah, we were only playing for a handful of hours, but it's been a 12-hour, game. That it depends on your experience of how into it you are. Maybe I'm sure I should know as a psychologist. Something to Google, something to research.
Now, do you have running thoughts?
Depends what tab in my brain we're talking about. The ADHD 1,000 tabs. I know my brain isn't a computer, but I think of it as a computer. Like my brain's my laptop, and I have every tab open on the internet. Like I have a TikTok playing that's just looping. It's just like somewhere back there. I have, scripting. Oh, I really should have said this to, the cashier when they asked, how are you going? And I said like, yeah, yourself, and made a fool of myself. And like, there's just so many different tabs open. So yes, if we call that running thoughts, very much so.
And how do you handle it? I know a lot of people who have running thoughts or ideas that keep going through their heads and have thousands of ideas. Some write it down, some like try to put it to the side. How do you deal with yours?
Work in progress. I'm still figuring that out. Like, again, only being diagnosed 3 and a bit years ago. And uh, for me, that first year of diagnosis was, fairly traumatic, like little t trauma. And so for me, it's like I don't really get time, like the opportunity, I think, to process the diagnosis and what that means. So I'm like, yeah, it's more like 2 years. And 2 years after, I'm almost 36, that's really not a lot of time to reprocess my entire life under this new like lens. So at the moment, I'm trying using AI actually, and the like voice function. So I like talk to it. It also sometimes feels ADHD because I'm halfway through a sentence and I stop to like swallow or pause, and then it interrupts me, and I'm like, bro, chill out, give me more time to process my thoughts. But I have tried where uh, I talk to it and go, I need to figure something out. And I just blab at it and I prompt it to help process something, create a bit more clarity around a bunch of thoughts or a project. Man, I have so many projects on the go all the time. But it kind of helps as if it were like another person, but I'm not annoying the other person with like, oh, and what about this? And what about that? Like ChatGPT doesn't have a family to get home to. I can just wake up. Well, I don't just wake up. I'm already awake at 3 a.m. because like, oh, there's that. And it's just like ruminating. I can ask ChatGPT to kind of help to almost, instead of being in a loop, push it to that next step, whatever that is. So if it's like I'm looping because I can't figure out something, maybe ChatGPT can help me figure out enough to then break the loop and then probably start another loop. But at least that's still movement forward.
Interesting.
Mm.
Now you work with those who have DID.
Yes.
Now, do you feel that those who have DID could also be autistic as well?
Unfortunately, there's not a lot of research on, actually, I don't think any, but yes, most of the folks I work with are neurodivergent in other ways as well. So DID comes under the umbrella of neurodivergence, as does like CPTSD. And a lot are either autistic or ADHD or both. And I think, that would make sense that an autistic brain has higher risk of being kind of traumatized in a sense. I mean, it depends. With a lot of folks who are multiple, their experiences of trauma are pretty like one end of, the unpleasant spectrum versus, say, my experience or other autistic experience of childhood. But if, say, masking like is, in my opinion, inherently a dissociative process, I have to detach from who I am authentically as a person, kind of like forget who I am, and then pretend to be this other person, and not as a separate self like you'd have as a multiple, but to present a different version. I have to kind of dissociate and detach from authenticity. And so it would make sense as, late diagnosed folks, I don't know who I am. Yeah, you've dissociated from who you are. You've detached from it for such a long time. How do we reconnect with that and go through the, traumatic process a lot of the time of I'm not allowed or I can't. But if someone's dissociating just as an autistic person to mask, and then additional traumas happen that is typical for folks with DID. They're already much more like they're the Bear Grylls of dissociation. They're like really good. I don't know if he's still a relevant, person. No shade, Bear, but I don't know if he's still relevant. But this idea of like they're really good, like autistic brains are really good at kind of detachment in that masking process. So then I would say, yeah, there's a higher prevalence. That's just my opinion. I don't know if that's what the research is. There's a refractory think tank. That's a group of folks who are multiple, and only multiples are allowed in that group, that I think are doing research around the comorbidity, like what is the actual prevalence of having multiplicity and autism.
Now, do you have any sensory traits yourself?
Yes, there's a lot of things that I do not enjoy as a sensory experience, like food texturally. Like food is a big one for me. And I think, yeah, growing up, it would always be, viewed as a picky eater, or just like you're a weirdo, because I don't want to eat specific things because the texture just, I have not experienced certain, foods because the texture just looks awful. I am not going to try that thing because the texture looks awful. Sound. Sound is a big one. So things are, it depends where my head is at, but if it's too loud or it's a specific type of sound, definitely can be overwhelming. But I also have auditory processing issues. So the sound also depends, like it depends on where I'm at headspace and how I'm processing whatever the sound is.
Now, you've written books. What
Yes.
is your writing process, and how did you deal with writing your book in ADHD? I mean, for one, with me, I've written a book and I knew it was just the hardest thing in the world because constant interruptions, constant thoughts going through my head, battling with correct, learning that I need to turn it off. How did you manage it?
Mm. I've written a few, and I would love to be able to say I have improved the process, but I have not. So for me, it's the never ending idea stream to be able to add to whatever book was being written, and knowing, or not knowing, just like just accepting it has to be finished, because I could be doing it for years and years to come, to make little tweaks, to make sure I've visually made it nice. Because, 1 month I'm writing it and I have this whole format and it's visually like, yeah. And then the next month, oh man, this is just so overwhelming visually. I need to change it, or the content isn't in the right place. Like a flow of content for it to make sense. I think I have noticed with the other things I'm kind of putting together now, of how do I know what to put first and then second and then third? Because it feels like a good flow of information. And then I'm in a different headspace and I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. I have to put, what's in position 3 in position 1. And just not ever feeling like it feels right. And then like passing it along to someone else and going, can you just read it? Can you just look at it? Does it make sense? Is it good enough? And they might say yes, or like tweak this. It's never going to be good enough for me. Like I always look back and go, oh, I could have changed this. I think it's just that it's never finished. And either do I write it as first draft, or do I write it as final draft? And so before I type it out, thinking about all the drafts in my head, what's a perfect way to say the statement? And then I just sit there and I'm not writing anything? Or do I just blab on a page and then I rework it? And it's like, which do I do first? And then being stuck in like, ugh, I don't know what to do at all. And then I just avoid. And then like a couple of months later, then might feel the dopamine hit to get back to it. It is really challenging to get those things done.
Now let's talk a little bit about your ADHD. And we've mentioned dopamine and getting that hit. Where do you get your hits from? I mean, it's hard when you're constantly chasing it. I know with me,
Mm,
I'm constantly trying to find that thing to give me enough energy. I am on Adderall and that helps to a degree, but I need that big hit if I want to have that burst of energy to get stuff done.
mm. Again, I feel like it's a work in progress. Like for a very long time, I'd used like energy drinks because it's a quick hit of, I guess, energy, even though it doesn't really sustain for for very long. There's a lot of adverse health effects. So it's an external. It's very hard to find an internal motivator, which I think is like a pretty common ADHD thing, unless, say, for myself, it is a sense of achievement. So if I know by just like I'm going to feel a sense of achievement doing the thing, which then inherently I get a sense of dopamine, like a pre dopamine hit, because I know I will achieve the thing. Um, and achievement isn't like, oh man, if I clean the bathroom, I'm going to feel a sense of achievement. Like, I don't care about that. It's mostly like work related, where it's a tangible, almost like I got the trophy. I know I'm going to get the trophy, but it's really hard. I don't have anything that is sustainable that gives me a dopamine hit or enough of a hit to motivate. So sometimes it is just figuring out how to do it begrudgingly,
Hmm.
like imagining. I tried, it was unhelpful, it was ineffective, but I tried for a little while imagining a different version of myself standing, like, say, next to my bed in like a business suit, like when I have to do emails or reports or something. And she's the business manager and she's telling me what to do. Because sometimes it's a little easier when someone else tells me what to do. Like if I had a boss, we have to do those reports. They're due tomorrow. Yeah, oh, yeah, I don't want to disappoint them. So I'm motivated by, not getting in trouble. But as a business owner, like I don't have that. So how do I create a boss? As I said, it was ineffective. I just kind of like flip off me while I'm in bed, like, nah, 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 nah. Because I know how to work boss me because it's me. But I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out at the moment. That's a healthy choice.
Now, have you gone through meltdown or yeah, have you burnout? Have you gone through a burnout before? And if so, how have you
Yeah.
handled it?
Meltdowns, burnout, like it's scary to say, like, because, I've only been diagnosed for a few years. And, when I was diagnosed, there was a lot of people that decided they were not interested in being in my life, in the kind of idea of, all the things that are actually the, autistic or ADHD traits that were previously quirky and cute are actually, like, now we know it's part of, a permanent thing. It's not cute anymore. Ugh. Almost like a ugh. And then they leave. And so it's a bit scary, like, even now talking about it, because it's like, man, there's so many other people that can leave, even people I don't know who are listening. But yes, I have had meltdowns, fairly big ones in life that, like, as you said, asked before, in retrospect, that might have looked like panic attacks, say, as adolescent, have actually been meltdowns. And uh, it's funny now, but at the time, it's deeply distressing. We're having like a really major panic attack to a point where I think it's hypoxic. And so your brain, brain isn't getting enough oxygen. You kind of have a mild seizure almost. And the ambulance people, because like no one has any idea what was going on at the time, so they just call an ambulance, which was also like super fun when you've no control over your body and you're like, I'm fine, but I'm also not fine. And then these strangers everywhere. And they kept asking, like, what have you taken? What drugs are you on? And I'm like the most vanilla person there is. Like, what do you mean? What drugs am I on? I don't even know where to get drugs to know, like, to be on drugs. And they just kept pressing that. And so for me, it was like, that was a meltdown. And that was such a serious meltdown that it ended up in what it was. But I have enough systems in place to avoid meltdowns. I haven't had a meltdown in probably 2 years. But burnout is a big one. Like, if I don't take care of myself, there is real risk of such bad burnout that I can no longer practice. Like, as a psychologist, you have to have like certain things in place to be able to ethically practice. And when you're in deep burnout, at least in my view, I can't ethically practice because I'm just not with it mentally. And there'd be too much risk of, I'm mid session and a person's like, oh, I'm having a really hard time. And I just have a meltdown. That's not helpful. Like, you're just having a meltdown or even a shutdown in the session. So I do try really hard to make sure I don't get to that level of burnout. But I feel like there's always like this kind of you're dipping your toes in burnout. At least for me, there's a dip in toes in burnout going, oh crap, like I don't want to go any further. What do I need to do to kind of come out of it? And then you're kind of out of it, but you're still like, if you're close to like actual autistic burnout, that's not a fun thing. You don't like, I'm in burnout or I'm healthy and well. There's like, I'm maybe neurotypical unhealthy, and then there's autistic unhealthy burnout. So it kind of feels like still figuring out how to come out of low, almost burnout. I was in really significant burnout and I couldn't work for a month or so a few years ago. This was right after I was diagnosed. So I still feel like I'm much further away from that level of burnout, but it still feels sometimes, ugh, I'm almost there. Watch out.
I know that feeling all too well. My first ever meltdown is
Mm,
when I went off to school. I
mm.
I was in my early 40s. First time flying, being away from my family for a year for my master's.
Oh, wow.
I went to England for my master's degree, and at the airport we get to the thing where to the gate, and the guy goes, "You can only have one adult with you."
Mm,
And I don't know what came over me, but I just started arguing with the guy, and he's like, "Sorry, these are the rules, blah blah blah." And all of a sudden, I just went into tears,
mm,
not aware of what's going on. And finally, my father said his mother will go with him. And the guy says, there is a glass wall between the gate, and on the other side of the glass wall, there's security and there's a chair. So he
mm,
can still see you taking off.
mm,
So my dad went on, my mom, and then the minute the boarding call sign went on, it's like a light switch flipped.
mm.
And I was better. And it was just like the weirdest feeling.
It can just sometimes just come on. Like, airports are the freaking worst. That like
Mhm.
I don't know if it was a meltdown. I still don't know sometimes. Like, what's a meltdown? What's a panic attack? What's just like freaking out? Like, where I've been on a plane and this like idea for me of like trying to unmask and be my authentic self, but also, oh man, to be in a meltdown as an adult on a plane, I felt embarrassed. And so I'm
Mhm.
like trying to suppress, but it ain't being suppressed. And so like
Mm.
having some other adult almost treat me like a child. They were very good. They weren't infantilizing me, but it still felt like I was in this child parent of like, I'm this sad kid having a tantrum, like a sad tantrum, not like angry, like, oh. And he's like checking in on me, which was nice, but it still was like, stop perceiving me, stop checking on me, just let me freak out by myself because I don't know what's happening. It just was overwhelming all of a sudden. And the like panic that might set in of like, oh shit, this is a meltdown. I can't do nothing about it. Like I can do some things to like maybe reduce duration or intensity. But this that scary part of like, oh, here it is. Why didn't I notice it earlier? What could I have done? And then all those thoughts running through your head, which also don't help meltdown. But it can be really scary when it comes out of nowhere, or it feels like it comes out of nowhere if you don't know your rumblings. And you're just in the middle of it, at least in my experience. And there's a whole bunch of people around. Like, go, everybody just go away. Let me do my thing by myself.
I know for a burnout, I know when I was at school, every day felt like a burnout because I'd
Oh,
wake up and it felt like I'd been crying all night. My eyes would be all watery. I'd feel exhausted for the day, like I was working on fumes. And then Friday would come and I'd crash. I'd sleep great, wake up feeling refreshed. Saturday, I'd
mm,
feel good. Sunday, I'd go to sleep and wake up and it was like start the routine all over again.
yeah. Like, not enough time to really have restorative, like, self care or rest. I'd read um, or listened to Sol Smith. He's been really good. I'm reading his book or listening to it because like reading his art. And he said a thing called restraint collapse. And I'd never heard that before. Um, and it was uh, that you have to mask. You don't have to, but you mask for such a long period of time. So, like, same for me in what I think you're describing that you're around these, like, you're in a system or an organization or an environment for a long time, like all day. Like, say
Mhm.
for me, it was a job and having to mask the whole time whilst doing the job or doing your studies. And then at the end of the day, that restraint of like suppressing a lot of stuff, having to pretend like we're all okay and we know what's going on socially all the time, you end up in this collapse state,
Hmm.
which is not something that can be easily like, oh, yeah, I just have a hot bath and then I'm totally fine. Because if you're masking for 8 hours, one hot bath for like
Yeah.
maybe an hour isn't enough. And then you know, compound that. You do that on a Tuesday and then you do it on a Wednesday. That there would be some times on weekends, you know, when I was working full time at a organization where I just blobbed and I was just on the couch, didn't move, did the basics like shower, bathroom, bit of food. And that was all I had capacity to do to be able to get to the next week. So it's that for me, understanding how do I avoid restraint collapse as much as possible. It requires me to unmask a little bit. So I'm not, you know, doing the restraint so much, but also understanding that sometimes, like yesterday, I didn't do very much. You know, if you're an observer, I had maybe a couple of things, and there was you know, say a hockey training, and there was just a feeling of I have to go because I feel bad if I don't go.
Hmm.
Um, but also, if I go, I will be masking. I don't think I have capacity to do that and be okay for, say, today, or to actually have a nice sleep, like a restorative sleep. Because if I'm exhausted, like if my nervous system is shot, I'm not actually going to have a good night's sleep. Might like collapse, but that's not restorative sleep. Hard to understand, I think, for a lot of folks who aren't ADHD or, you know,
Hmm.
just autistic or just ADHD, how impactful just existing is and how much more energy is used to get to a certain baseline that other folks, I guess, have the privilege of being at.
Now, how did you get into psychology?
Clients ask me that too. I keep one, I think I don't know. It just is the divine universe guiding me to these things. I think I've always wanted to do psychology, probably because autism. Like, I don't know what's going on, but people are so interesting. Like, high school was for sure floating head. Like, sure, I had a body, but like, it felt like floating head. And at times, like, say, lunchtime, I'd be sitting in this group. I wouldn't say friend group, but like people that were friendly to me. And I'd just observe, which now is hilarious. I'm like, duh, how do we not pick up on autistic? But I would just watch them and almost like it was a TV show or a movie and like really just watch. And it would be not entertainment, but there would be a level of like interest of why and what. And if I had a way to kind of influence these people. Mm-hmm. And so then it just naturally came out to like psychology to really learn how the brain works, how relationally things work, so the social stuff. Mm-hmm. I didn't do very well in school because school was really hard. And, you know, undiagnosed autism, so like a whole bunch of depression and anxiety. And then I didn't do well enough to get into a psychology degree. But rigid Joe was like, too bad. I'm doing the degree. I'm just not under the degree name. I'm just going to do all the subjects and apply to get under that like banner. So I was under like a business degree, actually, not doing any business subjects, just doing all psychology. And then I applied and my grades weren't good enough because some stuff happened, you know, a bit more little T trauma. And so they rejected me and then I apply again. They rejected me. So I applied a few times. But for me, it's the idea of I like working with people in an environment where the rules are very clear. Like psychology, the rules are very clear. They're also unclear. There's like a lot of gray. So I like having that kind of social dynamic. Obviously, they're clients, not friends. The social dynamic where I know what my job is. I know what I'm supposed to do. I know the expectations. I know what is expected of client. It just makes humaning and social so much easier. Plus, I feel like I'm good at it, and it's like nice to be interested in something and feel like you're good at it too.
Right. And then finally, how can people find out more about you and learn more about you online?
They can learn about like work Joe a lot. Like personal Joe is mostly off, like in like private areas, mostly because you know I've worked in. I did a bit of contracting in the prisons, and so you don't want people finding you, and a lot of the people I work with have also survived cults, and so that naturally just comes with like a bit more risk. So private Joe is pretty private, but they can find a lot about me, like the work side of me through like, website, Instagram, businesses, guided healing psychology. I'm pretty sure most of my books are available if they just Google like my name. I'm on Amazon with, books there. But yeah, guided healing psychology is usually where they'll find me because it's just me. I don't have any employees.
And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Reed Miles. That was Joe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.